You're going to use these knobs to adjust your amp sound, the amount of overdrive, and the volume. And the master knob then is going to be the overall mix, your guitar and the music that you're playing. Greetings, guitar engineers. I'm Desi Cerna, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use a guitar practice amp. I'm using a Boss Katana Air here, but its features are similar to like a Spark by Positive Grid or a Yamaha THR or other similar practice amps that I recommend. I recommend that players take advantage of the technology and use these small, lightweight, low-powered practice amps that have a variety of features like different types of amp sounds and different types of effects. You can also connect music and use them as a music player to practice, and you can it's got a headphone out so you can monitor with headphones for silent practicing. They're really an excellent tool to have. Great not only for beginners, but for players at all levels, because you can't always play at a stage or studio level when you're at home. You need something that's simpler and quieter and has features that makes it easy to practice. This particular Boss Katana Air also enables me to connect my guitar wirelessly, although right now I've got the cable in here. I'm using the headphone out so that it's going to my mixer, and I'm recording this. So you're hearing the direct sounds, but it does have speakers in here, so it produces enough sound to practice guitar at home in your room, and you're hearing the direct sound right now. So what I want to do is just kind of walk you through some of the basic features here, because there's a lot of features packed in these little practice amps, and it could be a little confusing. And what's most confusing for people that aren't familiar with these amps is the different volume knobs. You have a gain knob, which affects the volume. You have a volume knob, which affects the volume. And you have a master knob, which affects the volume. You also have knobs that can turn on and off effects. You have different types of amps. And what happens is sometimes users are just so overwhelmed by these features they don't know where to begin, and they don't even know how to get a basic sound. So that's something that I want to help you with here now. All right, let's dive in. So the first thing you might do when you get an amp like this is to go through the stored factory settings. On this particular amp here, I've got channel A and channel B, and the people at Boss have already created some sounds and they've saved them. Channel A has 3 different sounds saved to it. You can see this button is green, or it's red, or it's orange. We're back to green. Then I have channel B, green, red, orange, 3 more saved sounds. Panel means when I click this, however these knobs are set is what I'm going to hear. So let me go back to channel A. So there's the first saved setting. It sounds like this. And it's a nice clean sound, but it also has some nice effects. It's got some reverb in there, some delay. Sounds like I might have some chorus or something like that too. A nice sound, although it might be a little too effect heavy for kind of just basic strumming or something. But it's something that you could play around with. And then I noticed as I go through to the next setting in here, we're on red. All right, now they just give us kind of a weird sound. That's got kind of an auto-wah setting on it. You could fiddle around with that. This isn't going to work well for ordinary playing, but it could be a cool sound for some types of riffs and stuff. If I go to the next setting here. All right, so now we've got some distortion here. So it's like if you're playing something that's distorted. And by the way, I'm playing a Paul Reed Smith DGT guitar. I've got Seymour Duncan APH-1 pickups in it. I'll come over here to channel B, and so I've got 3 settings here. That's pretty heavy. That's a little bit more like vintage sounding to me. finally. That sounds like more modern, kind of heavy sound. A little heavier on the effects. Anyway, so depending on what type of practice amp you might have the Spark, you might have something by Yamaha or something by Vox or Blackstar, who knows. If it has buttons where you can save some presets to, it typically comes with some pre-programmed ones, and you can try them out and see if there's something that you might use. I kind of like this first one over here. I think it's kind of a pretty sound. So I kind of like that one. Anyway, it's good to just try them out and see if they might be useful. I'm going to go to the panel now. So now I'm in control here with all of these knobs, and this is really what I want to talk about. How can you actually use the knobs and create your own sounds, and how can you get your own basic sound? So let's go through that. The knobs on your practice amp, if you're using a different model, will be a little bit different, but they're all going to be very, very similar. The first thing that you want to do is turn off any effects. So this knob, I'm going to turn it all the way down, and this knob all the way down. Reverb, I'll turn that all the way down. And then if you have any EQ, like this has got bass, middle, and treble, put that up at 12 o'clock. And that should be kind of a flat EQ. It shouldn't be boosting or reducing any of those frequencies. And let's see, we have a master here. I'm going to put the master at 12 o'clock. I'm going to put this volume at 12 o'clock. I'm going to put the gain all the way down. And if you're using something like the Yamaha THR, it might say gain and master, and then you'll have like a guitar and audio output knobs down here. If you're using like the Spark, I think you have a gain knob, and then you have a master knob, and then it has an output knob. So different types of amps are doing the same thing, but they just may have the layout of the particular knobs might be different, and they might have used slightly different terminologies. But there's actually 3 different knobs that do affect volume. On this particular amp, it's gain, volume, and master. On the Spark, it's gain, master, and output. On the THR, it's gain, master, also an output. So let's talk about this, because this is where people kind of get most confused. So before we get into that, let's come down here, because practice amps will have usually a handful of different types of amp tones that it's going to emulate. This one, if I start with this knob all the way down, this says acoustic, so this is going to be pretty flat without really much electric guitar amp characteristics, so that you can just plug an acoustic guitar and get a nice clean acoustic guitar sound. Then I can go up here, turn clockwise, and I get to the clean setting. This is going to be a clean amp setting, probably like a Fender type amp thing. And then my next one is crunch, lead, and brown. And different manufacturers will use different terminology, but basically what's happening here is once you get past like the acoustic setting, once you get into the actual electric guitar amp settings, as you move the knob clockwise, it's going to increase the amount of overdrive or distortion that the particular amp could use. So these are based off of popular amps that have been used, like, you know, Fender Deluxe Reverbs or Tweed amps or a Vox AC or a Marshall, a Mesa Boogie, that sort of thing. But basically all you need to know is as you turn the knob clockwise, the particular amp models are going to provide you with more overdrive and or distortion. Typically by the time you get to the as you turn clockwise, when you get to the farthest point, you're actually in distortion territory. So these might be kind of more overdriven, and then more distortion. Now you have control over overdrive and distortion in other places too. So I'm going to set this to clean, And so if you're using like the THR, you could set it to clean, or you probably have a similar setting on the Spark or whatever amp you're using. So I'm basically going with the first electric guitar amp selection. All right, now here's my sound. Remember, I flattened the EQ, I turned all the effects off, and I turned the reverb off as well. Okay, so at this point, you want to focus on your gain and your volume, or it might be gain and master. You want to. We're going to deal with the first knob that affects volume, and then the second knob that affects volume, wherever it might be on your amp. And we're going to stay away from the last knob that affects volume, because that's kind of the master output, which affects the overall output of the amp. So we're going to work with those first two knobs. Gain. This is important. The gain knob is actually a knob that adjusts the how hard you're driving the preamp section of an amp if this were a traditional tube amp. So as you turn the gain knob up, you're going to increase not only the volume, but you're also you're pushing the amp into overdrive. Well, you know, this is a digital amp, so this isn't really working the same way it would on a traditional tube amp, but this is allowing you to have that same sort of sculpting control over your sound, so it's functioning like that digitally. So as you turn this gain knob up, you're not only going to, you're pushing the amp harder in its preamp section, and it does actually give you a volume boost, but really what's most important about this knob is that it increases the amount of overdrive. So if I have it really low, and then if I turn it up, not only am I gaining volume, but it's also not as clean. I'm going to go all the way up here, and I'm going to need to turn my master overall volume down here so I don't clip my recording software. Okay, so listen to that. Hear how it's dirty now? So even though this is a clean amp, like many classic, Fender style clean amps, you do have the opportunity to push it into overdrive. So that's what your gain knob is doing there. So think about your gain knob as amount of overdrive or amount of distortion, but it also affects the volume. So if you're going to turn the gain knob up, then you're going to need to adjust either the next volume knob or your overall output. Okay, so I'm going to put my master output back to 12 o'clock. Come back here, I've got the gain low, and then here's my next volume. It's up at 12 o'clock too. And then as I turn the gain up, okay, if I go any more, it's going to clip my recording software. So I'm going to actually turn this volume down. Whoops. So that's a nice crunchy overdriven sound. So you can use these two knobs here to adjust the amount of overdrive, and then this is going to take care of your volume for the particular amp. This is going to be the master. This is the overall volume for the amp, and this would include if you had connected a device, which you can do here. It's got a 3.5 millimeter cable connection in the back, an aux input. You want to plug in your phone or your laptop or a stereo or something to play music through here. Or you can also, this one you can connect by Bluetooth. And so if I have music connected and my guitar and I'm playing along with music, which is a great way to practice, it's really what you should be doing, you're going to use these knobs to adjust your amp sound, the amount of overdrive and the volume. And the master knob then is going to be the overall mix, your guitar and the music that you're playing. Adjust its level either through the built-in speakers or its level in the headphones if you were using headphones, or in this case for me the overall level, which is going to my recording software. All right, so let's talk about setting up a basic tone. Now you might think, okay, well I want a basic clean tone, so I want to turn that gain all the way off. But here's the deal. Typically you don't want the gain all the way down because it makes the sound too sterile. Usually you want to have a little bit of gain. You want it to sound like you're playing through a clean amp, but you've got it turned up so that the components are cooking and you're pushing it enough that it's producing a good tone. If your gain is all the way down, it's going to sound pretty stale. And so you want to kind of fatten it up a little bit. So usually a little bit of gain is going to make a clean sound just sound fuller, and it's just going to give it a little bit more body. Now this sounds really dry because we have no effects on it. So I'm going to come over to the reverb and turn the reverb up. I'll put it up to 12 o'clock here. There we go. Let me play the same thing again. So there we go. So that's a nice sound. I've got a little bit of gain here. It's still, you know, a clean sound, and I could use this for a variety of things. And as you're playing with music or a band or whatever you might be doing, you can decide, maybe I need a little bit more gain. It's a little too clean. Maybe I turn that up and turn this down. Let's see. So first rule of thumb is a good clean sound is not going to be completely clean. Keep that in mind. All right, so I've set up a bass sound here. That's B-A-S-E, bass, not B-A-S-S, bass. I'm on the clean amp model. I've got a little bit of gain, so it doesn't sound too thin or sterile. It sounds ampy. It's got a little bit of body to it. And then I adjusted the level here, so I got it so that I wasn't overdriving my recording software, and then I added some reverb so that it's not completely dry. And this is what you'll use as kind of your clean sound for strumming chords and playing songs that use a clean sound. And then you can decide if you want to clean it up a little bit more. But again, want it to be too clean. You want to have it sound like an amp. So that's kind of your the first thing you want to do is set up a basic clean sound like that. And then you can go through the other amp settings, and each one is going to get a little dirtier, and you're going to have to readjust your gain and your volume. Now once you get a nice bass sound, if you want to keep it and store it, you can usually go to one of your preset buttons and usually press it and hold it, and then it'll be stored there, so you can just call it back up with a touch of a button without having to readjust any knobs. I'm going to go to the next amp model. This is called Crunch. So okay, so big difference here. Here's the clean, and here's Crunch. So you're going to want to use that if you're playing a crunchy guitar part, something like. All right, and then you can kind of keep going. I didn't really need to adjust those knobs. I kind of like where they are right there, but I could adjust how crunchy this gets. I can increase or decrease the amount of distortion there, and then I'll use this volume knob just to balance it out if it gets too loud. Let's go to the lead sound. So here's the crunch. Here's the lead sound, so it sounds a little bit more aggressive. It's even more saturated. And I'm going to turn the volume down here so I can turn the gain up. Okay, so now it's thicker, even more distortion, so you might use this for a lead. So thicker, more saturated sound, more sustained for your rock leads. And then if I go up one more, this is going to be it's going to be a different type of distortion based on a different amp model, and it's probably going to give you even more gain if you want it. So I'm going to turn up that gain knob. Let's max it out here. I'm going to bring the volume back up. Might need to back that gain off. I think it was just a little too crazy there. All right, so that's one way that you could change your sound, going from clean to crunch to lead to more aggressive, and then you can adjust the gain there. And we haven't really touched any of the other knobs, but let me go back to the clean setting for a second. And I think I had it, what, maybe like this? About right there. Okay, so there's like a basic clean sound, and then now I can add effects. So most of these practice amps come with some built-in effects. We're already using reverb, and this one actually has 3 different types of reverb in it. So I can hit this button. Right now it's green, then it's red, then it's orange, and so it's 3 different types of reverb. And let me just turn this up all the way for a second. I believe this is a plate reverb. And then this is probably like a spring reverb. And this is a hall reverb, I think. And I think that I like the... maybe I'll go to the hall. And then I'll back that off. I don't need that much. I just turned it up so I could hear the difference. So we're using some reverb, and then maybe you want some delay. So this is where the way you adjust effects will be different depending on the type of amp that you have. For this particular model, this knob here is going to adjust delay in the first half of its rotation, and then in the second half of its rotation, it's going to adjust other types of effects, which are listed in the manual. So I'll just start with the first half of its rotation. Starting to hear some delay come in there. So I'm getting more and more of that delay. And then I can adjust how quickly it repeats by using this tap button right here. So, whoops. There's a quick repeat or a long repeat. So if I'm playing something like... I might do something like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so 1, whoops, 1 and. Let's try that. I didn't get it. There we go. So... So you can add some delay like that. Delay is great because it kind of makes your sound more ambient, gives it more depth, more sustain, and it kind of depends on what you're playing. Sometimes it can add a lot to your sound, sometimes it gets in the way. If it's getting in the way, try rolling it back. Maybe you need less of it, or maybe you need to turn it off. But it's an effect that's used quite a bit, so you can kind of experiment with that and use it. And this particular amp model, it's got this button here that changes colors between, what is it, green, red. I think that's orange. I'm having a hard time seeing the difference between red and orange. And so each button is going to have, it's going to change the type of delay that you're adding here. So to be a little bit more specific, when it's green, it's a digital delay. When it's red, it's an analog delay. And when it's orange, it's a tape echo. So I'm going to try the analog delay. And so on. And then when I get to the second half of the rotation here, it changes to different types of effects. So this is a tremolo effect. It's making the volume kind of waver. If I push this button, the next effect I can control here is the THR. That's what it says in the manual. So kind of an auto-wah thing. That's kind of interesting. And then if I hit this button again, now this effect is an octave. That's an interesting sound. Not the most practical sound. I probably wouldn't use that much. I think I'd probably end up using this the most. That's kind of nice. So I'm looking at the manual here to see what the different effects are. So here in the manual right here, like it tells you what the different effects are, and I'm going to go over to the other knob too, but it might not be a bad idea to take a picture of this and print it out and keep it next to your amp just so you can easily reference it and remember how to get to those effects. It's pretty simple. So, the idea here is that they want to give you a lot of options, but they need to reduce the amount of buttons and things. So some knobs need to have dual or triple functions, and so they found a way to do it. And it'll be different on each amp model that you might use, but it's similar in that somewhere along the lines, half of a rotation is one effect and the other half is another effect, or you push a button and then the knob is controlling a different type of effect. So this is why it's so important to just kind of read the manual, go through, turn your guitar on, listen to the difference in sounds, and like I said, maybe take a picture of some important graphs in your manual and just keep it next to your amp so you can quickly reference it. So let's turn this effect off and we'll come over here. This is either a boost knob or it is a modulation knob. So boost is going to stand for any type of basically an overdrive pedal, something that's going to boost it, like a blues driver, or maybe like a tube screamer, or like a distortion pedal. So I'm on the clean sound here. I could go to the crunch amp model, or the lead amp model, or the brown amp model, and that's going to add gain, which I can control here. But another way that guitar players will add overdrive or distortion to their signal is that they would use a clean amp, but then they would put overdrive or distortion pedals or boost pedals in front of the amp. And so that pedal in front of the amp is boosting the sound or creating the distorted sound. And you can actually do the same sort of thing here on one of these practice amps. Well, this model in particular you can. So I'm on the clean sound here, but I can come over here to the boost, and if I turn this up, I've just turned on a blues driver. It's like I just hit a blues overdrive stop box pedal with my foot. So here it is off. And then here it is with it on. And I can control the amount. Not only is it adding overdrive, but I feel like it's adding volume as well. And then if I hit this button, I can change what this particular effect is. Right now it's called a blues overdrive. This is a regular overdrive. That sounds like a tube screamer. It's got a really spiky kind of mid-range, you know. And then I can hit this button again, and now this is going to be a distortion pedal. So totally different sort of sound here. So once again, this is kind of like a blues driver. So here's a tube screamer. Like that, and then this is going to be like an actual distortion pedal. Whoops, did I get it? So in this particular mode, it's like we're putting a pedal board in front of a clean amp, and I can adjust the amount of each of those overdrives this way. Now if I go past the halfway point in the rotation with this particular knob, then it's no longer boost, it turns into modulation effects. The first of which is chorus, then it's flanger, then it's phaser. Some chorus. Here's flanger. And here's phaser. So I kind of like chorus, so I might put that chorus back on there. And I might go back and turn this delay on. Get this sound. All right, if those effects are not something you want, just turn them off. So I'll turn that all the way off. Now I'm just back to my basic clean sound. And just reverb. You usually always want to have some reverb. You don't want it completely dry. Okay, so you could do the same thing with these effects knobs if you were on other amp settings. Although if you're on an amp that's crunchy or overdriven or distortion, then typically it does not work well to add overdrive or distortion on top of that. Usually if you're going to add overdrive or distortion to an amp, you need to clean the amp up first and then add it with the with an effect. So you can experiment with that on your own, but just kind of keep that in mind as you go to the crunch amp model or the lead amp model or the brown amp model. If you try to add, like here's the brown, let's see. If I try to add a boost on top of that, let's start with the first one. Yeah, it's really extra noisy. It gets a little too messy You just don't need it. This already has a lot of gain on it, and I probably could add some gain here. I would be careful about trying to add boost, overdrive, or distortion on top of a signal that's already distorted. But you could add the modulation effects, so let's go past the halfway point on this particular knob and we'll get to, whoops, my volume's not up. Okay, this is chorus now. All right, that sounds good. Playing a little Rush there. Alex Lifeson would use distortion and chorus a lot just to give him a big full rhythm sound. And then you could try using, you know, if I push this button, instead of this being chorus, it becomes, what is it, flangers next. Okay, just being silly here, but you could experiment with that if you're familiar with some songs that use some of those effects. Let me just turn this off. If you're on one of these sounds, you certainly could add delay. Let's add more. Let's see. So. Maybe I put chorus on there too. What the heck, you know? Let's try that. Whoops, that's not chorus. There we go. So you can kind of sculpt the tone depending on what you're playing. If you're doing something like Brown Eyed Girl, you're just going to use a basic clean sound. Maybe you could add a little chorus or delay to kind of pretty it up a little bit. If you're doing something like, you know, All Right Now by Free, you kind of want a basic crunch sound. You don't really want any effects. You wouldn't want chorus or delay or anything on it, you know. But if you're going to play something like Rush or, you know, something like... some 80s rock, then you're gonna you might want to add some more effects on there. So just notice that you can get a variety of sounds out of this amp. Pretty good sounds considering this is a small piece of equipment. It's relatively inexpensive compared to what you would spend on a larger tube amp and a variety of stomp boxes, which you just don't need if you're playing at home because it's overkill and you'd never be able to turn that amp up and use it properly. It's one of the reasons why these types of practice amps are so popular and why I always recommend them. This is just a great place to start. If you are someone that goes out and plays large stages and you need the volume of like a combo amp or something like that, this is still a great piece of gear to have at home because you can use it at comfortable bedroom levels. You can record directly with it. You can monitor it with headphones. It's just so practical and so useful. And this is why I always recommend it. So I'm showing you how to use the Boss Katana Air here. There are different manufacturers that make similar amps, and sometimes the control knobs are laid out a bit differently, and sometimes they use slightly different terminology to describe the amp models, or it might say gain volume master, it might say gain master output, something like that. But they all have basically the same function, and so if you understand the basics, you can go from, you could use any one of them, and you could learn how to dial in a good clean sound, and then maybe add a boost or overdrive to thicken it up for maybe a blues lead, or maybe add some effects if you're going to do some music by the Police, or go to a higher gain amp if you're going to do some Van Halen or some Rush, and then maybe add some of those effects back in, so you just get some more depth and like a longer like delay tail to your sound. So There's a lot you can do. You can store them, so you could have a handful of your go-to sounds and you don't have to dial them in or make changes as you go song to song. You can just touch a button and you can recall some of your favorite sounds. Hey, if you found this video helpful, click like and leave me some positive feedback. If you have any questions or comments, you can post them in the comments below. And maybe if you need extra help and you wish you could get together with someone that could give you some personalized training on how to use your gear, you can welcome to reach out to me. Just go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, click on the contact link. I do offer Skype or Zoom lessons. And one of the things I do, aside from helping people learn how to play guitar better, is I teach them how to make better use of their gear. So we could walk through your gear specifically and maybe walk through some of the songs that you've been playing, and I can help you dial in appropriate sounds. And maybe that's just the sort of thing that you need to be working on right now, or maybe your playing needs help in other areas. If you are not sure what you should specifically be working on right now in order to become a better guitar player, go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, answer the questions I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction calibrated to your current level. So I'll show you how to fill in any gaps in your playing. I'll show you what you need to be focusing on so you can move forward and reach your music goals. You can enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. Just click on the link in the video description.